I'm Morgan Wilson, 23 years old, and my life just imploded on a Tuesday night. After a brutal 10-hour shift at Sunshine Cafe, I dragged myself home to find Mom waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed. Before I could even set down my grease-stained bag, she dropped the bomb. "Morgan, starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here. 4 years of college, an honors degree, and now this." The betrayal stung worse than the coffee burns on my wrists. I couldn't believe my own mother would turn landlord on me when I needed her most. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with family drama that blindsided you completely. Trust me, this story might just help you avoid the mistakes I made. Life wasn't supposed to turn out this way. 6 months ago, I graduated with honors in business administration from State University. My professors praised my work ethic, my analytical skills. I was that student who color-coded her notes and created study groups. Everyone expected me to land a corporate job right away. I expected it too. But reality hit hard after graduation. Application after application disappeared into the void. Interviews led nowhere. The few offers I received were insultingly low-paying, or required moving to cities where rent would swallow most of my paycheck. Meanwhile, student loan payments loomed on the horizon. Taking the waitressing job at Sunshine Cafe was supposed to be temporary. Just a quick pit stop to build my savings while hunting for something in my field. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Mom, Barbara Wilson, had always been my biggest supporter. A single mother since I was 10, she'd worked as an administrative assistant at the local hospital for nearly 20 years. Her life revolved around providing for Tyler and me. I remembered how she'd skip buying new clothes for herself to make sure I had everything I needed for college. How she'd stayed up late helping me with application essays, despite being exhausted from her own job. That made her rent demand even more shocking. This wasn't the mom I knew. Tyler, my 16-year-old brother, complicated the situation. Recently, he'd started skipping classes, hanging out with a new crowd his teacher had called about. Mom was constantly on his case, which created a perpetually tense atmosphere at home. Sometimes I played mediator between them, adding another layer of stress to my already overwhelming life. The house itself had seen better days. The roof leaked during heavy rain. The dishwasher had been broken for months. The living room furniture was the same set we'd had since I was in middle school. I noticed these things peripherally, but never connected them to deeper financial issues. After all, we'd always been comfortable enough, not rich, but never struggling for necessities. My friend circle didn't help my perspective. Kayla Matthews had landed a marketing job right after graduation and moved into a chic downtown apartment. Jessica Campbell was already being promoted at her father's insurance company and drove a new Audi. Compared to them, I felt like a failure, serving pancakes to hungover college students while wearing a polyester uniform that smelled perpetually of bacon grease. The day Mom dropped the rent bomb had been particularly humiliating. I'd served breakfast to Madison Taylor, my former classmate who now worked at a prestigious marketing firm in the city, a company that had rejected my application. Madison had been polite, but couldn't hide the pity in her eyes when she asked, "So, is this just until you find something in business?" I'd forced a smile. "Just temporary. I've got some promising interviews lined up." A complete lie. By the time my shift ended, my feet throbbed, my lower back ached, and coffee stains dotted my uniform from a particularly difficult customer who'd complained about everything from water temperature to toast darkness. I'd been looking forward to a hot shower and collapsing into bed. Instead, I walked into Mom's ambush. Looking back, there had been warning signs. Mom's increasingly frequent comments about grocery bills. Her suggestions that I contribute to household expenses when I could. The pointed remarks about my friends who lived on their own. But I'd brushed these off, secure in my belief that home was my safety net while I found my footing. The morning after Mom's announcement, I found her making coffee in the kitchen. I approached cautiously, hoping the previous night had been some kind of misunderstanding. About last night, I started, pouring myself coffee. Mom straightened her posture. I meant what I said, Morgan. Starting next month, you need to contribute rent. I help around here, I protested. I buy groceries sometimes. I clean. Sometimes isn't enough anymore, she replied, her voice firm but tired. There were new lines around her eyes I hadn't noticed before. You're an adult with a job. Adult children who live at home should contribute to household expenses. But I'm trying to save for my own place, I argued. And this job barely pays above minimum wage. I understand that. But I can't keep supporting you fully while you figure things out. She sipped her coffee, avoiding my eyes. $600 a month. The amount hit me like a slap. $600. That's almost half my monthly take-home pay. It's less than you'd pay for even a room anywhere else in this city. And it includes utilities, internet, and food. She wasn't wrong, which only made me angrier. So what? I'm just a tenant now. After everything I've done to make you proud. 4 years of college, Dean's List, all of it. Mom's expression hardened. This isn't about being proud or not proud, Morgan. It's about reality. My reality. Do you have any idea what it costs to run this household? I didn't, not really. Those were always mom concerns that happened in the background of my life. I can't do this forever, she continued, voice softening slightly. I'm not getting any younger, and my own retirement is woefully underfunded because I've been putting you kids first for years. That was the first moment I felt a twinge of something beyond self-pity, a fleeting recognition that my mother was a person with her own struggles and fears. But I quickly suppressed it, too wrapped up in my own sense of injustice. Fine, I snapped, grabbing my purse. I'll pay your rent. But this changes things between us. The tension simmered for 3 days. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, partly to earn more money, but mostly to avoid being home. Mom and I exchanged only essential information in passing. Tyler watched our Cold War with wary eyes, treading carefully around both of us. On Friday night, Mom called a family meeting. I reluctantly joined her and Tyler at the kitchen table, arms crossed defensively. I think we need to clear the air, Mom began. Morgan, I know you're upset about the rent situation, but there are things you don't understand. What's to understand? I replied coldly. You're treating me like a stranger instead of your daughter. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she placed a folder on the table. I need to show you something. She opened it to reveal a stack of bills, bank statements, and payment notices. Some had red, past due stamps across them. What is all this? I asked, my defensiveness giving way to confusion. Reality, she said simply. I've been trying to handle this on my own, but I can't anymore. As she spread the papers across the table, a troubling picture emerged. The second mortgage she'd taken out to help pay for my college. The credit card debt that had accumulated during periods when her hours were cut at the hospital. The home repairs that had been postponed for years now demanding immediate attention. Medical bills from when she'd broken her ankle last year and missed 2 weeks of work. The hospital cut back everyone's hours last year during restructuring, she explained. I'm working 4 days a week instead of 5. That's a 20% pay cut, Morgan. I stared at the numbers, my financial education finally being put to practical use. The monthly deficit was substantial. She'd been draining her modest savings to keep us afloat. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice smaller now. "You were focused on graduating, then job hunting. I didn't want to burden you." She sighed deeply. "But I'm drowning here, Morgan. Something has to change." Tyler, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "She sold her mother's jewelry last month." His accusatory tone was directed at me, not Mom. "The pearl necklace from Grandma. To pay the property taxes." Mom shot him a warning look. "Tyler, that's enough." But the damage was done. Grandma's pearls had been Mom's most treasured possession, a family heirloom she'd promised would be mine someday. The thought of her selling them while I complained about buying my own groceries made shame burn hot in my chest. "I had no idea," I whispered. "That's the point, Morgan," Mom said, gathering the papers back into the folder. "You've been living in this house, as if nothing has changed since you were in high school. But everything has changed. I'm not asking you to solve my financial problems. I'm asking you to start taking responsibility for your own expenses, like the adult you are." Tyler pushed back from the table. "Meanwhile, I can't even join the basketball team, because we can't afford the uniform and travel expenses." He left the room, slamming his bedroom door. His words were another blow. Tyler loved basketball. I'd had every extracurricular opportunity in high school: debate team, yearbook committee, business club competitions that required travel. Had Mom been silently struggling even back then? $600 a month, starting June 1st, Mom reiterated, standing up. "Or you need to find your own place." Her voice cracked slightly. "I love you more than anything, Morgan, but love doesn't pay the mortgage." She left me alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by the remnants of our family's financial reality. That night, I called Kayla, hoping for sympathy. "Your mom asked you for rent," she repeated after I explained the situation. "That seems reasonable, honestly." "Reasonable?" I nearly shouted. "She's my mother. Who's been supporting you completely for how many years?" 23. Kayla's voice was gentle but firm. "Look, my parents charged me rent the minute I got my first job at 18. It wasn't about the money, though they probably needed it. Dad said it was about teaching me to budget and be responsible. But $600. What's your take-home pay?" "About $1,500 a month." When I confirmed, she continued, "So she's asking for 40%. My studio apartment takes 50% of my salary, and that doesn't include utilities or food, which I'm guessing your mom's rent does." Put that way, it did sound reasonable, which only irritated me more. "Maybe she's doing you a favor," Kayla suggested. "Teaching you what real life costs, before you're totally on your own." My first month in this apartment was a shock: electricity, internet, groceries, cleaning supplies. All these things just magically existed at home. After we hung up, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 12. They were still there, faded but persistent, just like my childish expectation that I could continue living cost-free while my mother sacrificed everything. For the first time, I wondered if maybe Mom was right. The weekend passed in uncomfortable silence. I picked up a Sunday morning shift at the diner, grateful for the excuse to leave the house. When I returned home, I overheard Mom on the phone in her bedroom, her voice strained. "I know the payment is late again, but I'll have it by Friday. Please don't send it to collections." A pause. "Yes, I understand this is the third time. There have been unexpected expenses." Another pause. "Thank you for your understanding." Friday, I promise. I stood frozen in the hallway, my chest tight. I'd never heard that tone in my mother's voice before, a mixture of humiliation and fear. Barbara Wilson had always been the epitome of capability, handling every crisis with calm efficiency. Hearing her plead with a bill collector shattered something fundamental in my understanding of our family dynamic. Later that afternoon, while Mom was at the grocery store, I found myself opening the kitchen drawer where she kept household papers. I wasn't proud of snooping, but I needed to understand the full picture. Beneath neatly paper-clipped coupons and take-out menus, I found more past due notices. The electricity bill was 2 months behind. The home insurance payment had been deferred twice. A letter from a debt consolidation company lay opened, its contents suggesting Mom had inquired about their services. As I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, a memory surfaced from my childhood. I was 9, and I desperately wanted to attend space camp during summer break. It cost $1,200, an astronomical sum for our single-income household. Mom had taken on evening shifts at a local department store for 3 months to earn the extra money. I remembered her falling asleep at the dinner table one night, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. But she'd made space camp happen. That memory collided with my recent behavior, my indignation over buying my own groceries, my resentment at being asked to contribute to the household that had supported me for my entire life. The contrast made me sick with shame. At dinner that night, the 3 of us ate in uncomfortable silence. Tyler kept his eyes on his plate. Mom made a few attempts at conversation that died quickly. I pushed my food around, appetite gone, wondering how our family had reached this point of disconnection. After dinner, I texted Kayla, "Is your roommate offer still open?" Her response came quickly, "Absolutely." Rent would be $950 each, plus utilities. Usually comes to about $1,100 total per person. Nearly double what Mom was asking. The reality check stung. The next morning, I received an email from Meridian Marketing Group, the company I'd interviewed with twice and felt confident about. The message was brief and devastating. "While we were impressed with your qualifications, we have selected another candidate whose experience better aligns with our current needs." Rejection number 12. Or was it 13? I'd lost count. I closed my laptop and buried my face in my hands. My carefully constructed post-graduation plan had completely fallen apart. I was a business administration graduate serving pancakes and living with my mother, who could no longer afford to support me. Rock bottom felt like a generous description of my situation. That evening, I stayed late at the diner, volunteering to close up. The quiet of the empty restaurant was preferable to the tension at home. As I wiped down tables, tears I'd been holding back for days finally broke free. I sank into a booth and sobbed, shoulders shaking with the release of accumulated disappointment, shame and fear. "Morgan. You okay?" I looked up to find Nathan, the diner manager, standing by the booth with concern on his face. In his mid-30s, Nathan had always been kind but professional. I had never shared personal details with him before. "I'm fine," I managed, hurriedly wiping my face. "Just tired." Nathan slid into the booth across from me. "That doesn't look like tired. That looks like the weight of the world." Something about his gentle tone broke the last of my resistance. The whole story tumbled out: my failed job search, Mom's financial struggles, the rent ultimatum, my shattered sense of identity. "I don't know who I am anymore," I admitted. I was supposed to be successful by now. Instead, I'm a burden to my mother and a disappointment to myself. Nathan listened without interruption. When I finally ran out of words, he nodded thoughtfully. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I have an MBA from Wharton. I stared at him in disbelief. You're kidding. Nope. Graduated with honors in 2008, right as the economy crashed. Couldn't find work anywhere. Ended up taking this job as a server just to pay bills. He gestured around the diner. Worked my way up to manager. It's not what I planned, but I've made peace with it. Will I ever make peace with this? I whispered. Your situation is temporary, Morgan. Mine became permanent by choice. I discovered I actually enjoy the restaurant business. But your education isn't wasted, even if your path looks different than expected. He paused. As for your mom, speaking as someone who lived rent-free with parents for a year after grad school, the rent isn't just about money. It's about respect. Respect. For her struggle, her sacrifice, and her need to prepare you for independence. The real world charges rent, Morgan. No exceptions. That night, I drove home in silence, Nathan's words echoing in my mind. For the first time, I truly considered my mother's perspective, not just her financial reality, but the emotional weight of raising 2 children alone, of carrying the entire burden of our family's well-being for years. Who had ever taken care of Barbara Wilson while she was taking care of everyone else? The realization hit me with crushing force. I had been acting entitled to my mother's continued sacrifice, as if her purpose in life was to support mine indefinitely. The shame of this understanding was nearly unbearable. I pulled over to the side of the road, unable to continue driving through my tears. I wasn't crying for myself anymore, but for my mother, for all she had given, all she had endured, and for how blind I had been to her struggle. In that moment, parked on a dark suburban street, something shifted inside me. The narratives I'd been telling myself, that I was a victim of circumstance, that the world owed me the success I'd worked toward, that my mother was being unreasonable, crumbled under the weight of a simple truth. I wasn't entitled to anything. Not success, not an easy path, and certainly not unlimited support from my exhausted, financially strained mother. It was time to grow up. 2 weeks after Mom's ultimatum, the Cold War in our household continued. We orbited each other cautiously, exchanging necessary information, but little else. Tyler retreated further into his room, emerging only for meals and school. The house felt like a shared living space rather than a home. Thursday morning brought another crisis. My 10-year-old Honda made an ominous grinding noise on the way to work, followed by a dashboard lit with warning lights. I barely made it to Sunshine Cafe before the car shuddered to a complete stop in the parking lot. The mechanic's verdict came that afternoon, a failed transmission. $800 minimum to repair, and that was with a used replacement part. $800 I didn't have. $800 on top of the $600 I needed for Mom's rent in just 11 days. I sat in the mechanic's waiting room, staring at the estimate in my hands. My eyes burned with exhaustion and stress. Without transportation, getting to work would require either expensive ride shares or complicated bus routes that would add hours to my commute. I couldn't afford either option, financially or time-wise. There was only one person who might help. The same person I'd been coldly avoiding for 2 weeks. Mom? I said when she answered her phone. My car broke down. The transmission. It's $800. My voice cracked. I don't have it. The silence on the other end stretched painfully. I can't help you with that, Morgan, she finally replied, her voice gentle but firm. I just don't have it to give. The last thread of my self-control snapped. So what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to get to work? How am I supposed to pay your rent if I can't even get to my job? My voice rose with each question, drawing concerned looks from others in the waiting room. I can drive you until you figure something out, Mom offered. Or help you look into bus routes. I don't need a ride, I need money. I regretted the words instantly, hearing how they sounded. I understand you're frustrated, Mom said evenly. But this is exactly the kind of unexpected expense adults deal with all the time. Cars break down. Roofs leak. Medical bills come due. I get it, I snapped. Life is hard. Thanks for the reminder, Morgan. I hung up, immediately feeling childish for doing so. I arranged for the car to be towed to our house, another $75 expense, and called Kayla for a ride home. The next day, true to her word, Mom adjusted her schedule to drive me to my early shift before heading to her own job. The 20-minute commute passed in uncomfortable silence. When she dropped me off, all she said was, "Text me when you're done. If I can't get you, I'll make sure Tyler can." My shift was disastrous. Distracted by stress, I mixed up orders, spilled coffee on a customer, and forgot to put in a table's ticket entirely. By mid-morning, I was barely holding myself together. During my break, I escaped to the employee restroom and broke down in tears for the second time that week. Everything was falling apart. My car, my relationship with my mother, my professional prospects, my dignity, all crumbling simultaneously. When I emerged, red-eyed and sniffling, Nathan was waiting in the break room. "Take the rest of the day off," he said. "Paid. You're not in a state to be working." "I can't afford to lose the hours," I protested weakly. "You're not losing them. I'm paying you anyway." He held up a hand when I started to object. "Consider it an investment in a valuable employee. Go home, Morgan. Reset. Come back tomorrow stronger." His kindness nearly broke me again. I nodded gratefully and gathered my things. With no car and too much pride to call Mom, I started the long walk home. The May sun beat down mercilessly as I trudged along, my waitress shoes completely unsuitable for the 3-mile journey. By the time I reached our neighborhood, my feet were blistered, my uniform was sweat-stained, and my thoughts had spiraled to new depths. I was a college-educated adult who couldn't afford to fix her car, pay rent, or even get herself home from work. What kind of failure did that make me? As I approached our house, I noticed Mom's car in the driveway. She was home early too. Great. More confrontation was the last thing I needed. I entered quietly, hoping to slip unnoticed to my room. Instead, I found Mom at the dining room table, surrounded by papers, a calculator, and her laptop. She looked up, startled by my appearance. "Morgan. What happened? Why didn't you call me?" "I walked," I said flatly. 3 miles. In this heat." She stood up, concern evident in her expression. "Are you okay?" The genuine worry in her voice cracked something in me. All the anger, all the resentment I'd been nurturing suddenly felt petty and misplaced. This woman had raised me alone, had sacrificed consistently for my well-being, and was now struggling financially while I sulked about contributing. "No," I admitted, voice breaking. "I'm not okay. Nothing is okay." Mom guided me to a chair and brought me a glass of water. As I sipped it, I noticed what the papers on the table were: bills, budget worksheets, and to my surprise, information on loan consolidation programs. "What's all this?" I asked. "I'm trying to figure things out," she said, sitting back down. "Looking at options." I picked up one of the papers, a worksheet comparing the costs of selling our house versus refinancing the mortgage. Another showed calculations for downsizing to an apartment. "You're thinking of selling the house?" The home I'd grown up in, the only stability, we'd had through my parents' divorce and the subsequent challenging years. "It's on the table," Mom admitted. "The property taxes keep increasing, and the place needs work we can't afford. An apartment would be lower maintenance, lower cost." I stared at her neat handwriting, the careful calculations, the weight of adult concerns I'd been oblivious to while pursuing my education and early career. Mom had been carrying these burdens alone, shielding Tyler and me from the precariousness of our situation. "I had no idea," I whispered. "I didn't want you to worry about adult problems while you were still becoming an adult," she replied. "But maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I should have been more transparent about our finances all along." In that moment, seeing my mother's exhaustion and worry laid bare, I felt more ashamed than ever of my reaction to her rent request. She wasn't being cruel or unsupportive. She was finally asking for help after years of handling everything alone. "I'm sorry," I said, the words inadequate for the depth of my regret. "For how I've been acting. For not understanding." Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know this isn't what you planned. Life rarely follows our plans." Later that night, alone in my room, I confronted the uncomfortable truth. I had been acting like a victim when I was actually incredibly privileged. I had a college education, a temporary job, and a mother who had supported me unconditionally for 23 years. Many people my age had none of these advantages. It was time to stop dwelling on what I'd expected my life to be and start dealing with what it actually was. Time to take responsibility not just for my expenses, but for my attitude. Time to be the adult I claimed to be. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in months, I felt something like determination replacing the self-pity that had been my constant companion. The weekend after my breakdown, while Mom was at work and Tyler was at a friend's house, I sat down at the dining room table with my laptop, a notebook, and a determination to understand our family's financial reality. I created a spreadsheet listing all the household expenses I could identify: mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, property taxes. Using my business education for something practical at last, I calculated monthly averages and projected annual costs. The total was sobering. Mom's salary, even before her hours were cut, barely covered the essentials. No wonder she'd been accumulating debt. As I dug deeper, I discovered more evidence of Mom's quiet struggle. An envelope of receipts from Silver Linings, an online marketplace I didn't recognize. Curious, I looked up the website and found it specialized in second-hand jewelry and collectibles. With a sinking feeling, I checked the receipts against the dates of significant household expenses. A pattern emerged: a silver bracelet sold before property taxes were due, a collection of vintage brooches liquidated the week our water heater failed. Mom had been selling her personal possessions to keep our household running. While searching for more information, I found a folder labeled Education in Mom's desk drawer. Inside was documentation of all my college expenses, tuition statements, book receipts, housing costs. Also there, monthly statements for a student loan payment I'd completely forgotten about. A loan in Mom's name that she had taken to cover my sophomore year when my scholarship fell short. The most recent statement showed a payment made just 3 weeks ago, right around the time she'd told me about the rent requirement. She'd been paying my student loan while I complained about buying my own groceries. The evidence of my mother's sacrifices, and my obliviousness to them, was overwhelming. I closed the folders, my hands shaking. How had I been so blind? The next discovery came from an unexpected source. Tyler returned from his friend's house earlier than planned, finding me still surrounded by financial paperwork. "What are you doing?" he asked suspiciously. "Trying to understand our money situation," I answered honestly. He hesitated in the doorway, then walked over to the table. Did you know Mom stopped going to physical therapy after her ankle injury? Insurance only covered 10 sessions, and she said we couldn't afford more. I hadn't known. Mom still occasionally limped on damp days, but I'd assumed she was fully recovered. She sold her concert tickets too, Tyler continued, sitting down across from me. She and Aunt Julie were supposed to see that singer Mom loves. Been planning it for months. But then I needed new glasses after mine broke at basketball practice. He fidgeted with a pencil. She thought I didn't know, but I saw the refund email. Each revelation was another blow to my self-centered worldview. While I'd been focused exclusively on my career disappointments, life had continued for my family, complete with sacrifices and challenges I'd been too self-absorbed to notice. I've been skipping stuff too, Tyler admitted quietly. Told Mom the science club wasn't doing competitions this year, but really, I just didn't ask her for the entry fees. And I've been mowing Mr. Peterson's lawn on weekends for extra cash. My 16-year-old brother had been more financially aware and responsible than I had. When did you get so grown up? I asked, half joking, half serious. He shrugged. When I realized Mom couldn't do everything alone. His simple statement hit harder than any lecture could have. I'd been acting as if our family's stability was a given rather than the result of my mother's constant effort and sacrifice. That evening, I reached out to Professor Reynolds, my favorite business faculty member. Her marketing strategy class had been my best subject, and she'd written one of my recommendation letters. I'm sorry to bother you after the semester, I wrote, but I'm struggling to find entry-level positions in marketing. Would you have time for a brief call to discuss strategies for this difficult job market? To my surprise, she responded within the hour, offering to meet for coffee the following afternoon. The market is challenging, but not impenetrable, she wrote. Let's talk specifics. Over coffee, Professor Reynolds listened to my job search struggles with a thoughtful expression. The first position is always the hardest to land, she acknowledged. But I think you might be aiming too high. Entry level at major firms is extremely competitive right now. Have you considered smaller companies? Startups? Places where you could wear multiple hats and gain diverse experience? I hadn't. I'd been focused exclusively on established companies with formal marketing departments and clear advancement tracks. Actually, she said, pulling out her phone, a former student of mine launched a marketing agency last year. Small operation, but growing. They work mainly with local businesses on digital strategies. They might be looking for someone with fresh ideas. She sent a quick text, then looked back at me. What about your portfolio? Do you have sample campaigns, social media strategies, content writing samples? I didn't. Another oversight in my job search. I'd been relying solely on my degree and classroom projects. That's your homework, Professor Reynolds said firmly. Create a portfolio this week. Nothing elaborate, just clean, professional examples of what you can do. I'll introduce you to Blake at Keystone Marketing, but you need to be prepared. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. Not because a job was guaranteed, but because I had a concrete action plan instead of vague aspirations. The next day, I threw myself into creating a portfolio. I designed sample social media campaigns, wrote content pieces, and created a basic marketing strategy for a fictional small business. The work absorbed me completely, reminding me why I'd chosen this field in the first place. I loved the blend of creativity and analytics, the challenge of crafting messages that resonated. By Friday, I had a modest but professional portfolio and an interview scheduled with Keystone Marketing for the following Monday. Professor Reynolds had made the introduction, speaking highly of my classroom work and analytical skills. The weekend before the interview, I took a deep breath and approached Mom in the kitchen. I have an interview on Monday, I said. With a small marketing agency downtown. She looked up from her coffee, genuine pleasure lighting her face. Morgan, that's wonderful. Tell me about it. As I described Keystone and the position, Mom listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. It was our first real conversation in weeks, and I realized how much I'd missed our easy rapport. I need to look professional, I said hesitantly. But I don't have anything appropriate that still fits. In the past, this would have been a clear cue for Mom to offer to take me shopping. Instead, she said, "What's your budget for interview clothes?" The question caught me off guard, but I recognized it as part of our new reality. I have about $70 I can spare, I admitted. Mom nodded. Let's see what we can find at that consignment shop on Main Street. They often have good workwear. We spent Sunday afternoon shopping together, finding a gently used blazer and blouse within my budget. The experience was different from our previous shopping trips, more collaborative than parental, but satisfying in a new way. That night, as I laid out my interview outfit, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in me. I was no longer waiting for life to provide what I thought I deserved. Instead, I was working with what I had, finding solutions rather than dwelling on problems. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany with trumpets and lightning. Just a quiet understanding that adulthood wasn't something that happened to you all at once. It was a series of choices to take responsibility, to contribute, to stop expecting the world to accommodate your desires. As I practiced interview questions in the mirror, wearing my second-hand blazer, I didn't see a failure or a victim. I saw a young professional at the beginning of her journey, not the journey I'd planned, but perhaps the one I needed. The Keystone marketing office occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse downtown. Industrial chic with exposed brick and ductwork, it housed a team of 7 young professionals who created marketing strategies for local businesses. The energy was palpable as soon as I stepped off the elevator, music playing softly, people calling ideas across the open workspace, walls covered with campaign mock-ups and client feedback. Blake Thompson, the founder, was younger than I expected, perhaps 30, with an easy smile and rapid-fire speech pattern. He led me through a conversational interview, focusing less on my limited experience and more on my approach to marketing problems. We don't need someone who knows everything already, he explained. We need someone adaptable, creative, willing to learn on the fly. Our clients range from family restaurants to boutique law firms. Different voices, different needs. I presented my hastily assembled portfolio, explaining my thought process behind each piece. Blake nodded appreciatively at several of my ideas, occasionally calling over colleagues to look at specific elements. Your academic background is solid, he said as we concluded. Professor Reynolds speaks highly of your analytical skills. But can I be honest? He leaned forward. We can't match what the big agencies pay. We're small, still growing. The base salary for this marketing coordinator position is $38,000. Significantly lower than I'd hoped for my first professional position, but more than I was making at the diner. And most importantly, it was in my field, with growth potential. The trade-off, Blake continued, is that you'll get experience across the entire marketing spectrum, instead of being siloed into one narrow role. Social, content, email, analytics, client relations, you'll touch everything. That kind of diverse experience is gold for your long-term career. I'm interested, I said firmly. Very interested. 2 days later, Blake called with an offer. I accepted immediately. That evening, I sat down with my calculator and budget spreadsheet. After taxes, my new salary would bring home about $2,400 monthly, substantially more than my diner wages, but still modest. I calculated my expenses carefully: car payment, insurance, student loan payments, cell phone, and personal expenses. Even with careful budgeting, Mom's $600 rent would be tight, but manageable. June 1st arrived, the deadline for my first rent payment. I'd been saving aggressively, picking up extra shifts at the diner while working out my notice period. That morning, before leaving for my final week at Sunshine Cafe, I wrote a check for $600 and placed it on the kitchen counter with a note: first month's rent. Thank you for everything. Love, Morgan. It was a small gesture, but it represented a massive shift in my perspective. This wasn't just money, it was acknowledgement of my adult responsibility to contribute to the household that had supported me unconditionally for so many years. When I returned home that evening, Mom was waiting in the living room. The check sat on the coffee table between us. "You didn't have to do this today," she said. "I know you don't start your new job until next week." "I wanted to," I replied. "It matters to me to keep my word." She nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you, Morgan. Not because of this check." She gestured to the table, "but because of how you've handled these past few weeks. It takes character to adjust your expectations and take responsibility." "I should have done it sooner," I admitted. "I was so caught up in what I thought my life should look like that I couldn't see what was right in front of me, a family that needed me to step up." "We all have those moments," Mom said. "The important thing is that you recognized it and changed course." That conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter for our family. With my first professional paycheck, I not only paid rent, but also set up automatic transfers for my student loan, taking over the payment Mom had been covering. I researched debt consolidation options and presented Mom with information that might help her refinance her high-interest credit cards. Together, we created a family budget board in the kitchen, tracking household expenses and savings goals. Tyler got involved too, contributing his lawn mowing earnings to a fund for his school activities. At Keystone Marketing, I threw myself into learning everything I could. The work was challenging and often overwhelming: client demands, tight deadlines, the steep learning curve of professional marketing execution. Some days I felt completely out of my depth, questioning whether I belonged in the field at all. But unlike my earlier job search disappointments, I didn't let these challenges define me. Instead, I stayed late, asked questions, volunteered for additional projects, and gradually built confidence in my abilities. 3 months into my new position, Blake assigned me as lead coordinator on a campaign for a local credit union, my first major client responsibility. The project was successful enough that the client specifically requested me for their follow-up campaign. "See," Blake said after the client meeting. "This is why we hired you. You have good instincts." That evening, I shared the news with Mom over dinner. Her genuine enthusiasm meant more than any professional recognition. "We should celebrate," she suggested. "Maybe dinner out this weekend." "My treat," I said immediately. I got a small bonus for the credit union project. The look of surprise and pleasure on her face confirmed how completely our dynamic had evolved. I was no longer the child expecting to be provided for, but an adult capable of giving back. Our family finances remained tight, but the atmosphere in our home had transformed. Instead of tension and resentment, there was collaboration and mutual support. Mom and I talked openly about money, both challenges and victories. Tyler, watching our example, developed a new maturity about financial matters, saving for things he wanted rather than simply asking for them. The most profound change, however, was in my relationship with Mom. Paying rent hadn't created the landlord-tenant dynamic I'd initially feared. Instead, it had elevated our relationship to one of adult equals, with mutual respect and shared responsibility. We still had mother-daughter moments, but underpinning them was a new appreciation for each other as individuals navigating life's complexities. 6 months after Mom's rent ultimatum, the demand that had seemed so harsh at the time, I understood it for what it truly was, not a rejection of support, but the final lesson in a lifetime of parenting. She hadn't abandoned me to sink or swim alone. She had simply removed the floaties and stepped back, confident in the strokes she'd spent 23 years teaching me. 1 year after Mom's rent announcement, our lives had settled into a new normal that would have been unrecognizable to my former self. I was thriving at Keystone Marketing, having received a modest raise that brought my salary to $42,000, still below industry standard for larger agencies, but fair compensation for the valuable experience I was gaining across all aspects of marketing. Mom's financial situation had stabilized. With my consistent rent contribution and Tyler's part-time job at the local grocery store, she'd been able to pay down some of her credit card debt and even start rebuilding her emergency fund. The roof had been repaired, a joint investment we'd all contributed to, and the ancient dishwasher finally replaced. Most significantly, Mom had started taking a community college course in medical coding, pursuing a certification that would allow her to earn more at the hospital. Watching her study at the kitchen table in the evenings filled me with profound respect. At 49, she was reinventing herself professionally while still working full-time and managing our household. "I think I'll move out this summer," I told her one Sunday morning as we shared coffee on the back porch. "Start looking for a place in June." She looked up, surprised. "You don't have to, Morgan. This arrangement is working well." "I know. That's partly why I want to, because I'm choosing it, not because I feel forced." I smiled. "Besides, I'm seeing someone now, and bringing dates back to my mom's house is getting a bit awkward." Mom laughed. "Fair point. But don't rush into something you can't afford just because of dating logistics." Her concern reflected how much our relationship had evolved. She was no longer pushing me toward independence, but ensuring I approached it wisely. "I've been saving," I assured her. "And Kayla's lease is up in July. We're looking at 2-bedroom apartments in that new complex on Westview. It's within my budget, especially split 2 ways." Mom nodded approvingly. "You've come a long way from thinking $600 in rent was highway robbery." We both chuckled at the memory of my initial outrage. It seemed childish now, almost unrecognizable as my own reaction. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately," I admitted. How entitled I was. How I expected life to unfold according to some predetermined script: graduate, land dream job, instant success. That's not entitlement, honey. That's youth. Mom sipped her coffee. Everyone has that moment when they realize life doesn't follow the neat storylines we're sold. The important thing is how you respond to that realization. Tyler joined us on the porch, hair rumpled from sleep. At 17 now, he'd grown 4 inches in the past year, his voice deepened, his childish features maturing into handsome young adulthood. But the most significant changes weren't physical. The financial awareness our family crisis had sparked in him had extended to other areas of responsibility. His grades had improved dramatically, and he'd started researching college scholarships on his own initiative. "Mom, I need your signature on this scholarship application," he said, placing a form on the table. "It's for students interested in engineering. Full tuition if I get it." "When's the deadline?" she asked, reaching for a pen. "Next Friday, but I want to submit it early." He glanced at me. Morgan helped me with the essay part. I'd spent several evenings reviewing his application, impressed by both his writing ability and his methodical approach to college planning. He'd learned from my experience, determined to minimize student debt and maximize opportunities. I have some news too, Mom said after signing the form. I got an email from Silver Linings yesterday. Remember those pearls I sold last year? She smiled at our surprised expressions. The buyer returned them. Said they'd been a gift for his wife, but she preferred something else. He asked if I wanted to buy them back at the same price. Mom, that's wonderful, I exclaimed, knowing how much those pearls had meant to her. I'm not going to buy them back, she said calmly. That money went to keeping this family afloat during a difficult time. I don't regret that choice for a second. Her words illustrated how completely our priorities had realigned. Material possessions, even sentimental ones, paled in comparison to family stability and well-being. The following week, I helped a new junior coordinator at work navigate her first client presentation. Watching her nervous preparation, I recognized my former self, eager, anxious to prove her worth, terrified of failure. The first one is always the scariest, I told her. But remember, Blake hired you because he saw potential. Trust that. I feel like I'm faking it, she confessed. Like everyone's going to realize, I don't belong here. I smiled, remembering that exact feeling. That's imposter syndrome, and literally everyone experiences it. The secret is that we're all figuring it out as we go. Even Blake. Even you, she asked skeptically. You always seem so confident. I laughed. A year ago, I was waitressing and having a meltdown about paying rent to my own mother. Trust me, confidence is built through surviving challenges, not avoiding them. Later that day, Blake called me into his office. The credit union was impressed with the campaign results, he said. They've recommended us to 2 other financial institutions. I want you to take lead on those accounts. Both of them? I asked, surprised at the scope of the responsibility. You're ready, he said simply. You've proven that repeatedly. As I thanked him and returned to my desk, I reflected on how differently I measured success now. A year ago, I'd been fixated on salary figures and prestigious company names. Now, I valued growth opportunities, increased responsibility, and work that engaged my skills and creativity. My definition of success had matured along with my understanding of adult responsibility. That evening, Mom, Tyler and I planned a small weekend getaway, our first family vacation in years. Nothing extravagant, just a cabin rental at a nearby lake, but it represented our improved circumstances, both financial and emotional. Remember when we could barely talk to each other without arguing? Tyler remarked as we discussed fishing gear and hiking trails. That wasn't even a year ago, I reminded him. Amazing how much can change in a relatively short time. Mom smiled at both of us. I'm proud of how we've pulled together. Not every family could navigate what we have and come out stronger. Her words captured perfectly what I'd been feeling. Mom's rent ultimatum, the demand that had seemed so harsh, so rejecting at the time, had ultimately been the catalyst for tremendous growth, both personal and familial. It had forced me to confront not just financial reality, but also my own misguided expectations and sense of entitlement. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been tears, arguments, resentment, and fear. But through that difficult process, I'd discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed: resilience, adaptability, and the capacity to find gratitude even in challenging circumstances. Most importantly, I'd gained a deeper understanding of my mother, not just as a parent, but as a woman who had faced countless obstacles with quiet determination and selfless love. The rent she'd asked me to pay wasn't about money. It was about respect for her journey and recognition that I was ready to begin my own. As I prepare to move into my own apartment next month, I carry with me lessons that no university could teach, about financial responsibility, certainly, but also about the balance between independence and interdependence that defines truly mature relationships. I understand now that growing up isn't about separation from family, but about relating to them in new, adult ways. Mom's ultimatum wasn't the end of her support, but the beginning of a different, equally valuable kind of support. The kind that believes in your capacity to handle life's challenges and respects you enough to let you try. Has someone in your life ever given you a tough love moment that seemed harsh at the time, but ultimately helped you grow? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this perspective. Remember, sometimes the challenges that seem most unfair are actually opportunities in disguise. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own path to adulthood.